Welcome to the deep dive. A lot of people are thinking about real estate right now, maybe moving, maybe just curious about what's happening.
Definitely. And today we're digging into something pretty interesting. Why, nationally, something like 70% of potential sellers think it's actually a good time to sell, even with, all the economic uncertainty floating around.
Right, that 70% figure is striking, and we want to look at that through a specific lens today, right?
Exactly. We're going to zoom right into the Sarasota, Florida market. We've got a recent Realtor.com survey giving us that national picture. But then we also have some very specific Sarasota data from March 2024.
And Sarasota seems to tell a bit of a different story compared to that national confidence.
Yeah. A fascinating contrast, actually. It really highlights how local markets can behave differently.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, understand why sellers seem so confident nationally, but also unpack the specific dynamics, the reality happening down in Sarasota.
Sounds good.
So let's start broad. That's 70%. What's supposedly behind that national confidence?
Well, what the Realtor.com survey points to is it's less about sellers thinking, oh, the market's perfect, and more about just life changes.
Life changes like what?
The usual drivers, job relocations are a big one. Family situations changing, needing more space or maybe less.
Downsizing, upsizing.
Exactly. And also, interestingly, people adjusting to cost of living pressures. We're seeing folks move from, say, really high-cost areas because, relatively speaking, other places look more affordable now. It becomes almost a financial necessity, or at least a smart move.
Okay, that makes sense. Personal timelines trumping perfect market conditions. Life happens.
Pretty much. People need to move when they need to move.
But then, like you said, we pivot to Sarasota and the picture gets, well, different.
It really does. The shift there over just the past year has been quite dramatic if you compare March 2024 to March 2023.
Wow. Okay, lay those numbers on us. What does the Sarasota data show?
All right, so for single-family homes in Sarasota County, listings, the actual number of homes available, up 76.6%.
76%, that's huge.
It is. Up to 3,374 listings and condos. It's even more dramatic. Listings more than doubled, up 100.3%.
Doubled, wow.
Yeah, 2,153 condo listings. So a massive increase in the amount of stuff for sale.
And that obviously tips the scales a bit, doesn't it? More choice for buyers changes the whole dynamic.
Absolutely. You see it reflected directly in what we call the month supply of inventory.
Explain that quickly. What does that metric tell us?
Sure. It basically measures market balance. How long would it take to sell all the current homes listed if no new ones came on the market, based on the current sales pace?
Got it. So what's the month's supply look like in Sarasota now?
For single-family homes, it's hit 5.3 months. That's, getting close to what we call a buyer's market. 6 months is often seen as the balance point.
Okay, and condos?
Condos are already there, 6.8 months supply. Yeah. That's definitely tipping into buyer's territory.
So buyers in Sarasota clearly have more leverage, more options than they did a year ago. Are houses sitting longer too?
They are. The median time it takes to get a contract signed,
Right.
that's climbed to an average of 43 days for both single-family homes and condos in Sarasota County.
43 days. So definitely taking longer to sell compared to the frenzy we saw maybe a year or two back.
No question. It's a clear slowdown in how quickly things are moving.
Okay, so here's the puzzle then. Nationally, 70% of potential sellers are feeling optimistic, driven by life events. But in Sarasota, a specific market, we see inventory soaring and homes taking longer to sell. How do we square that? Why might sellers anywhere, including Sarasota, still feel confident listing?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. I think first, even with more inventory in Sarasota giving buyers more power, it doesn't mean homes aren't selling.
Right.
Sellers who are realistic, who price their homes competitively based on today's market, and who, frankly, make sure their home shows well, they can still absolutely attract solid offers.
So strategy becomes much more important for sellers there.
Exactly. But there's another factor particularly relevant in markets like Sarasota cash buyers.
Yes. Florida sees a lot of those.
A significant number. And cash deals offer sellers a certain insulation. You're not worrying about mortgage rate hikes derailing the deal or long appraisal and underwriting processes. It's faster, more certain.
So that certainty, even if the overall market has softened slightly, could absolutely contribute to seller confidence. They know there's a pool of buyers who can close quickly.
Precisely. It takes some of the volatility out of the equation for them.
So connecting this back to our listeners, if someone's thinking about selling, especially in a market like Sarasota that's seen a shift, what's the key message?
I think it's about being prepared and strategic. Understand these local dynamics, know that it might take a bit longer, that pricing is critical. It's less about trying to perfectly time some mythical market peak and more about being ready when your personal timeline says go, but going in with your eyes open to the current conditions.
Be informed, be realistic, be strategic.
That sums it up well.
Okay, so let's recap the main takeaway. Nationally, many potential sellers feel okay listing, mostly because life circumstances are pushing them to. But a market like Sarasota shows us the reality can be more complex on the ground.
Right. Increased inventory, longer selling times. It means sellers there need a thoughtful approach. It's not necessarily a bad time to sell, but it requires more savvy than maybe a year or two ago.
It really underscores how different local markets can be, even when there's a broad national sentiment.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a couple of interesting thoughts, doesn't it? Like, given these contrasts, the national feeling versus the Sarasota reality, how much should sellers adjust their strategy based purely on their specific local conditions?
Good question. And maybe what other unseen personal factors beyond just the big life events might be quietly fueling that seller confidence, even when some market signs point the other way.
Exactly. Things to ponder as the market continues to evolve.